Hello, students. I'm your tutor, Sarah Adebola, and you're welcome to another episode of Natural Skincare Formulation. You're welcome to your very first lesson in Euro Module 4. We're going to be talking about GMP and PPE. What is GMP? GMP simply means good manufacturing practices. Now that you're on your journey to becoming a skincare formulator, you're also going to be a manufacturer of skincare products. For this to happen, you need to learn how to observe good manufacturing practices. There are 5 key elements to good manufacturing practices. 1. Product and primary materials. The product is the final result which will be sold to your consumers, whereas the primary materials are the raw ingredients that are used to make the product. This is where the issues often erupt. If primary materials are not properly assessed before production, a flawed product can be made. For instance, if you had not researched about alpha-arbutin and the description and how it should look like, if you end up buying a counterfeit alpha-arbutin powder and use it in that formulation, it might end up messing up the whole formulation and not giving you desired results. This is why good manufacturing practices have standards that demand the master formula to be followed for final product with no deviation. This ensures that quality is assured through constant testing and comparisons. 2. Premises and equipment. Laboratories must maintain uniform premises and equipment. Your equipment in particular can experience a good deal of variation. For example, let's take a look at hand mixers or homogenizers, which is a very common equipment in skincare labs. Laboratories easily keep rusted homogenizers in an effort to cut costs and avoid buying new equipment. However, this is a very wrong manufacturing practice. You need to invest in a new homogenizer to ensure that the best practices are being followed and that there is less risk of equipment failure, and to also prevent your product from being contaminated. Number 3, people. Practices can never be properly implemented if the people working in a lab are not properly trained. Now let's imagine that you're already a big skincare formulator and you've grown in your business. You're definitely going to need to employ lab attendants. Now, while it does take time and investment to train your employees in good manufacturing practices, quality control standards, this is crucial to the implementation of procedures. Furthermore, the training methods with which these employees are educated must be assessed and reassessed on a regular basis to ensure that they're up to date. Number 4, procedures. The procedures themselves must also be scrutinized. These procedures must be constantly updated as technology is updated and more is learned about pharmaceutical processes. All procedures must also be well documented. This means that if there is an issue during the manufacturing process, it can be easily traced back to the source. You can document this in your formulator's diary. Now, number 5, processes. The processes of GMP essentially refer to documentation that can be used to prove that your procedures will be followed and have been followed. Auditors regularly check laboratories to ensure that they are following GMP procedures, GMP storage conditions, and more. By keeping documentation regarding processes, laboratories will be able to ensure that they are acting properly. Part of those processes includes you documenting the last time you changed your mixer, for instance, the last time you cleaned your counter, and all of these important processes. Don't be scared. You do not have the money to set up a full-blown laboratory yet? No worries. You can create your own laboratory from the comfort of your home while still observing GMP. You can formulate from the corner of your room or your kitchen, and we're going to discuss that in the last lesson of this module. What is PPE? PPE simply means personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment include protective clothing, helmets, goggles, and other equipment designed to protect the wearer's body from injury or infections. Skincare formulation can be a bit dangerous too, in case you didn't know that. When you're dealing with some strong botanicals or actives, You need to protect yourself so you do not get hurt in the process. I have personally sustained some unforgettable injuries while formulating in the past, and I now know the extreme importance of PPE. For the purpose of the study, PPE will be classified into 5 categories. 1. Eye and face protection, which include your goggles and face shields, like you can see on your screen. 2. Hand protection, which is basically gloves. We have different types of gloves, like you can see on your screen. 3. Body protection, such as your lab coats and your aprons. 4. Respiratory protection, which include your surgical masks and respirators. 5. Hearing protection, which are basically earplugs. Even with natural ingredients, there is still a certain amount of risk that is involved in formulation. Essential oils can seriously harm your eyes, molten wax can burn your skin, or fine powders such as charcoal and sodium cocoyl isethionate can irritate your airways when you inhale them. Personal protective equipment should be part of your good manufacturing practice, and it's always better to be safe than sorry. By using PPE, you're both protecting yourself, your products, and your customers from contamination. PPE essentials include a box of gloves for a one-time use. These disposable gloves prevent cross-contamination of your product and should always be worn when formulating. There is basically no exception. Oh, I'm just formulating a 10-gram batch. You still need to protect yourself and your product, so there is no exception for wearing your gloves. An apron is also needed. It is a knee-length overcoat which we wear over your clothes, and it protects your clothes from splashes and your product from contamination. We also have the lab coat. A lab coat is preferable compared to your apron because it doesn't just give you a more professional look, it is more protective than an apron. Goggles are needed to protect your eyes from any splashes of essential oils, preservatives, AHAs, and any kind of particle. It also prevents your eyelashes from falling into your products. There was a time I was working without my goggles and glycolic acid splashed into my eyes. That eye has not remained the same ever since. So your goggles are extremely important. If you cannot afford the laboratory goggles, you can just wear your normal glasses. Make sure that they are properly disinfected though, and you can wear them till you can afford to buy a proper laboratory goggle. You're also going to be needing your hair nets. Nobody wants a high performance product with a stray of hair in it. It's not nice. You might even get sued. Just imagine you bought a product for a very expensive price, and whilst using it, you found a stray hair in it. You're going to start thinking that the product was contaminated or it's not even effective, and for rich people, they might go ahead to sue the company. This is why you should have your hair packed into a ponytail style, or most importantly, get a hairnet. You can get a pack too because they're disposable, just like your disposable gloves. You're also going to need closed shoes, which are only going to be for use in your lab. To prevent stuff from dropping on your feet and to prevent contamination from outside coming into your lab, you're going to need to get closed shoes that are meant only for your lab and make sure they are clean at all times. Now you're going to need to sanitize your tools as part of good manufacturing practices. You definitely cannot control how your consumers will treat your finished products, but what you can control is the good manufacturing practice in your skincare lab, ensuring that your formulations leave your lab as clean as possible. This means that you want to avoid any contamination of your instruments, raw materials, containers, counter, and your finished product. Here are some basic steps for sanitization. 1. The formulator should indulge in regular hand washing with a plain bar or liquid soap as a regular routine in your skincare lab. 2. Make sure you're washing your beakers and spatulas with hot soapy water. 3. Cleaning your lab environment, cleaning the floor, and wiping the counter with dishwashing soap. The next stage is disinfection. You should disinfect your instruments, jars, counter, and equipment all the time. Disinfecting with alcohol is quite effective, and here are some ways to do that. 1. You can disinfect with ethanol in 30 to 95%, prepared from distillation, and it's the most naturally available disinfectant. you could also disinfect with 2. Your isopropyl alcohol, which is a synthetic alcohol. You can spray your surfaces with isopropyl alcohol and wipe with sanitary wipes. We use 70% isopropyl alcohol because 99 or 100% will evaporate really quickly before sanitizing the surface. But 70% with 30% water will stay on longer on the surfaces, sanitizing them properly before evaporating. 4. You're going to need vodka around 40%, which is a good substitute for ethanol if you don't have access to the others. 5. You can also steam your instruments by putting them into boiling water for 3 minutes, but this is not always possible, especially when you're using plastic materials or materials that are not heat resistant. Part of good manufacturing practices is always converting your formulas from percentage to grams according to the batch size you're making, and you have to measure the needed ingredients and set them aside before starting the formulation process to avoid costly mistakes. Trust me, I've been there, and it's not funny. You have to always label the measured ingredients that you're about to use in your formulation. You have to label the phases and solutions. It's extremely vital. For this, you're going to need paper tape and temporary markers. Also label your finished products right after making them. Be organized. Make sure everything in your lab is in order while formulating and right after to avoid terrible and costly mix-ups. Always wash your equipment with warm soapy water immediately you're done formulating. Leaving them dirty and greasy for minutes or hours can cause microbial growth, which might infect your formulations when next you're using them. And this brings us to the end of this lesson. See you in your next lesson.